It's a really good question, and it's a great topic, particularly in business. When do you decide that this is enough and it's time to pull a pin, or are we just at the edge of, when you're digging for gold and you're like literally a centimeter away and you give up when you could have just pushed on a little bit further and all of a sudden it happens. I don't think there's a black and white answer for that, and I think that I've been in a failed business and we pushed on for 10 years with investors, and it was a really, really challenging time. Financially, I would have been much better off if I pulled the pin 5 years before we decided to. But for me, I had to give it everything that I possibly could before I definitively could make that decision for myself and for the investors as well. I think it's a really difficult thing to come to terms with, is like, is this me not listening intuitively that this is not the path? I always think if it's getting too arduous, if it's getting too challenging, we should be in flow, and life should be really quite an effortless process. And if it's too hard, then it's usually a signal that maybe we're going down the
Yeah,
wrong
because
route.
part of you is like, why does it need to be this difficult? And then also sometimes people look in and go, oh, you're doing great. And that's what people's view is from the outside. But internally, it just feels like a constant schlep. But then I listen to How I Built This quite a lot, and nearly every successful entrepreneur in that goes through this shit to get out the other end. Even, I don't know if there's any parents listening, but like Paw Patrol, which is a big thing with kids. I listened to that podcast, and that's actually like a toy company that started back in the 80s, and how they were the guys that invented that kind of, you put water on this little potato sack and it grew hair up through the thing. That was their first like hit. And they went through all these waves of like they'd find a toy, it would create millions for them, but then there'd be a shelf life and then it would fall off. And the guy was talking how they used to have 900 staff and worth X amount of million. And then they nearly went bankrupt until they put out this literally last minute call going, we need a new idea. This guy wrote a show about Paw Patrol. They went on a trip to Japan, which they learned about, if you want to have a successful franchise, you basically have to have everything, the show, the movie, and Paw Patrol was the thing. And now they're worth, $10 billion or whatever. And now it's obviously huge. So it's like those guys would have been in that same scenario going like, we're at the end here, but they clawed it out of nowhere, the 11th hour, and now it's back to a multi-billion-dollar company. So it's like,
I know, but maybe we have an example. You could give that example, and then sort of another example of some guy who done, like Tom just says, 10 years of grafting, and like, it's it's just life, and there's going to be both ends of the spectrum. I suppose context is king there, looking at every individual situation and the person involved in it.